A woman who made America laugh for 30 years confesses, "I hate them." On live TV, an Oscar-winning actress claimed a co-star snatched her spouse. She had an abortion. A charming man insulted her live on air. A moral icon stared at her like she was trash. Lucille, we've been through a lot. That's another thing that's brought us closer over time. Not just our lengthy history that us apart. The last, her greatest love, signed away the empire she built using paper. Who are they? She was choking me, so I beat her to get her off. Why did Lucille Ball hide this for over 50 years? Frightening introduction, watch out. This is a Hollywood verdict. Dazzling, but cruel though. Everyone was clamoring. It was bewildering, and I wanted to be alone that satisfied with my opening night performance. Lucille Ball, who made America. Birthed in 1911 in Jamestown, New York, Lucille Ball was a poor girl with sad blue eyes who wanted to leave her prejudiced village. She modeled, played tiny roles, and cleaned dishes to get a job at a comedy event no one thought she could accomplish because women were expected to be gorgeous but never witty. Lucille Ball did both. Unbelievable. With I Love Lucy, she used laughter to attack. First comedy to use 3 cameras and film live. First woman to run Desilu Productions, a prominent Hollywood studio. While fans praised Lucy Ricardo as the joy symbol, Lucille's hidden catastrophes surrounded her. Deceived by her spouse Desi Aries behind the scenes during the 100th episode, warned by CBS execs, "We'll cancel your show if you make political jokes again." Younger actresses called her the red dinosaur behind her back for daring to gain the major role after 50. Backstage at a taping, ad, "I can make the whole country laugh, but I've never let anyone see me cry." Lucille Ball was the first woman to prove women could be humorous, forceful, and dominating. Hidden under that title, no one inquired if she was happy that wanted her to keep performing. Now famous, she breaks the quiet since not all smiles, joyous grins, and painful smiles. First betrayer, co-star Vivian Vance, who grabbed the attention. All of America loved Lucy and Ethel, but Lucille was once out of the spotlight, the diary entry said. "She hated me more than the fans loved me." As her best friend on I Love Lucy, Vivian Vance wasn't simply jealous. Desi Aries was observed exiting Vivian's dressing room at 11 p.m. while Lucille was in a network meeting. Despite set rumors, Lucille didn't believe them until she found a handwritten message from Desi's pocket that read, "I could still hear your laughter in my ears last night." Lucille raged. She was heartbroken but kept quiet to protect her image. Lucy and Ethel embody friendship on national television. Vivian persisted, covertly petitioning producers for equal pay. She stormed off set mid-shoot after being refused lines with Lucille, stopping production for 3 worse. Vivian rumored Lucille had an abortion to keep her. Lucille's role caused a week-long advertising boycott that persisted until she stared straight into the camera on a special show and stated, "I can forgive envy, but I won't forgive someone who smiles and stabs me. Back with my husband." If the first betrayer stole your spotlight and man, the second, an Oscar-winning celebrity, made Lucille a national joke through the media. The second traitor, Bette Davis, the drama queen who damaged Lucille's dignity to maintain her position. These buddies drank during post-Oscar parties. Just getting cast in a lead role by a Bette Davis-friendly director ended their friendship. 4-time Oscar nominee Bette Davis hated the idea of a comedian and a woman entering drama. Comedian, not artist, she hissed at reporters when asked about their collaboration. But that was just the start. Lucille Ball was rumored to can she play a role that requires intense feeling after an abortion. An unidentified source was quoted, and the industry knew that Bette Davis possessed such information. Bette said at an industry party, "If Lucille can drama, I can too." Wheelchair humor. Worse, at the Golden Globes, Bette jumped up and left mid-speech when Lucille was nominated for a Lifetime Achievement Award. Lucille knew, but the press termed it a headache. It was obvious I didn't need her help, but I thought strong. Lucille corrected me. Women didn't have to step on each other to rise. If Bette Davis could use someone's reputation, the third betrayer. A dashing the Hollywood star made Lucille's physique a punchline. Frank Sinatra, the third betrayer, humiliated her forever. Lucille thought Frank was a charming man or polished player, friend and friendly co-worker, but she never thought their 1963 visit on his show humiliated them. Lucille appeared on the Frank Sinatra show as a surprise guest. During a light-hearted interview, Frank suddenly stepped up, grabbed her waist, And the audience laughed as he slapped her in front of millions of live viewers. The cameras caught Lucille's astonished reaction. But the performance continued. She confronted Frank backstage, who shrugged and said, "Lucy, relax that I improved your show's ratings." Frank repeated the joke weeks later. Life magazine interview. Lucille acted girly on her first date. She was shyly cute. "I like that humor." Though mute, Lucille wrote in her diary. She stated, "No one witnesses face punches, but that slap was seen by everyone that harmed my dignity." Years later, after receiving a TIVA award, she said, "I've learned that comedy should never involve touching unless it's welcomed." However, if the golden voice could mock someone's self-respect for fun, fourth betrayer didn't touch or insult, but looked. Lucille feels naked on set. James Stewart, the sharp-eyed figure who buried skepticism in Lucille, that classic Hollywood star. It's a wonderful life hero. Someone America admired. Lucille Ball saw James as someone who never fit in. Hollywood. A Desilu co-production audition. Lucille approached Universal Productions' casting room in a basic attire. Stewart was already there, his gaze piercing her like she was invisible. She gave an emotional speech. When the director asked Stewart, he smiled and continued, "I don't believe she's ever truly suffered." The room laughed after a brief quiet. Lucille stood frozen and was fired from the project. James kept his distance at industry functions. One day, he congratulated all nominees except Lucille. The reporter questioned why, and he said, "TV actress." Lucille writes, "His eyes said I was a joke. His look made every emotion I'd exhibited seem artificial. No touching, no scandal, just a piercing glare and a mute coldness." However, if someone can break you with a glance, the final betrayer is Lucille. My crafting partner took everything from her: love, work, and Desi Aries, Lucille's boyfriend, husband, and fifth betrayer, biggest betrayal. He wasn't her co-star or husband. Desi co-founded Desilu Productions, one of America's earliest, created I Love Lucy with her television empires. He also wrecked Lucille's world. Desi was often seen with young models, nightclub dancers, and even the set during the show's golden age at secretary. Lucille often confronted him, but he shrugged it off. It's PR. The show requires understanding. However, that fateful night, Lucille, while recording a 10th anniversary episode, a loyal aide whispered that Desi had signed away. His dizzy loose stake without informing you. She ran to work. He departed minutes earlier with only a note. "Lucy, you'll do better without me. That I need to be free from my deserter partner." Dizzy sold his stock, quit the show, and divorced in one. Lucille lost her spouse, co-star, and right mind that night. Tio run the bloody corporation she founded. DC was the funniest me life and worst wound. 5 names, 5 cuts, but also 5 testaments to women's incredible strength. She doesn't need compassion at 77. Only to be known. They cut with laughter. Lucille Ball never told these stories. She shared them to explain. Stage lights only disclose the nicest parts, yet the shadows behind them sometimes raise laughter. Tearful at 77. She didn't want sympathy. She was regaining her voice for herself and other women in industries who were humiliated, terminated, or ignored for speaking out. Music. This is a criticism of an industry, not just hatred. Once required women to be cheerful, charming, and quiet. Now it's your turn. Who did Lucille the most harm? Wound? Share this video to keep the truth unburied. I stayed because she was choking me and I was beating her to get her off. I never dared say it throughout my life. But now at 77, I must confess for myself. The Frank Sinatra reality for everyone. You suppose Oh Blue Eyes was the famed voice that enchanted millions. Oh, you can on the moon. You think I was the sitcom queen with infinite laughter. Something between myself and Frank was never reported. I thought, this affair, it never will move so well. A lovely, dangerous love that elevated and crushed me. Simultaneously. Behind the bright lights and ceaseless cheers, long, lonely nights, midnight calls. Today I'll reveal whispers only we heard. Do you dare? Listen. In 1956, Hollywood was in chaos when I was 45 and Frank was 41. With I Love Lucy, I was still America's top star at the sitcom that tens of millions of families watched weekly. But behind the scenes, marriage to Desi Aries had failed. We laughed on TV, publicly held hands, but privately argued. Andy felt like America's most famous and loneliest lady on frigid evenings. Frank changed after a tough start in the early 50s. That extraordinary return. From Here to Eternity in 1953 earned him, and Frank Sinatra returned to success in 1956 after winning Oscars. Sold out clubs, chart-topping hits like In the Wee Small Hours, swinging songs lovers. He was America's most wanted man, the one everyone wanted to sit next to. But among all those women, he was his midnight call on a June 1956 night. Driving alone to Beverly Hills after filming a new I Love Lucy episode, Frank's villa was bright. He stood in an open doorway, unbuttoned white shirt, cigarette in hand. He spun, "I've got you under my skin." Frank drank whiskey and brought me into the living room. Initially, he sat, started another cigarette, and Lethe looked to me as smoke circulated in the golden light. Voice rough. "Lucy, you make America laugh. Have you ever sobbed in public?" I laughed, then went silent, and the tears arrived. Our secret meetings began that night. I was 46, Frank 42 in 1957. My marriage collapsed. The press sniffed scandal. They saw me light on screen, but didn't know. Dizzy busy with business dealings. Frank always has new ideas. Beautiful. But we met quietly in between. Carelessly. I left the studio at 1 a.m. to drive down the deserted LA streets. Frank's door would be opened. We sat across from each other listening to ballads like Young at Heart or Night and Day. While drinking, he'd chat of extensive tours, about stunning stages and lonely hotels. I discussed the pressure of becoming the perfect woman when exhausted. Frank would sometimes stand, touch my shoulder, say, "Lucy, as long as you're here, the world out there doesn't exist." I was 47 when I believed him in 1958 that the final season of I Love Lucy was approaching. My marriage to Desi was like A. Frank reportedly dated Juliette Prow. Lauren Beale lists press celebrated names. I smiled at the headlines, but Frank called at night. "Lucy, don't believe what they write. I call you at 2 a.m. smiled through tears. "Frank, the world will never forgive us. They learn." We were careful yet imperfect. At a Palm Springs party in late 1958. Frank brought me onto the maybe. He drank and glanced at me. We were too close. Maybe his blue eyes revealed too much. A distant photographer captured it. The tabloids covered it the next day. Lucille Ball, the only woman who could make old blue eyes laugh. We denied it. However, following that, I felt washed whenever I went outside. I was 48 in 1958. Frank 44. My Hollywood Walk of Fame star should have made me joyful. Day. I wanted Frank were with me in front of the throng. He contacted me at night, slurring, "Lucy, that star is well deserved. You've always been my biggest star." I laughed, but then I cried after hanging up because we would always be in the shadows. I was 49, Frank 45 in 1959. America was shaken when I divorced Desi that year. They labeled me a feminist icon, a woman who could leave a bad relationship. Marriage. But I knew my heart had broken long before. Frank sent a little arrangement of red roses to my residence. "I'm still here, Lucy." I spent hours admiring those flowers. Wondering if the world would accept us. Frank never settled on one. He lived on stages, lounges, murmurs in the dark, and I was one part. But he once "Lucy, your unique point 1956-1960 were secretive years. Years of tears and laughter. I played the strong woman. Generational role model. But at night, I was just a woman sitting next to Frank Sinatra, listening to the world-seducing voice and wondering, is this real love or just a quiet chapter in a legend's life? If my audience had heard what he murmured in my ear, they might have been breathless in 1960. When I was 49 and Frank 45, the divorce from Dizzy Aries shocked America. They labeled me a symbol of strength. The woman strong enough to leave love was unaware that the night I signed the divorce papers, my hands shook and tears drenched the page. Reporters went off. I smiled despite my heartache. The phone rang an hour later at home with Frank's voice, the alcohol-laced, sluggish end. "Lucy, you're free." I didn't respond. Tears returned. He added, "I'll always be here." That night, ISAT.by listening to his recording all the way over and again near the window, every word seemed how it was for me in 1957. Loving someone is no big deal. Good unless he loves you completely. I turned 50, Frank was 46. Most women in Hollywood was beyond its prime, but I was still on top. TV audiences cheered and journalists lauded her brilliant smile. I returned to Frank late at night. When I drove to his Palm Springs house after filming, Frank answered the door and grabbed me hard and muttered, "Lucy, I can't give, please don't leave." I rested my head on his shoulder and muttered, "Frank, I need something real." Just enough to avoid heartbreak. But even that small bit came with tears. Every time we went close, other women's shadows blocked us. Frank was never a one-woman man. The press followed his romance nonstop. In 1962, rumors circulated regarding his dating Juliette Prowl, Hollywood buzzing. I sat alone in my living room. Newspaper felt like my heart was being shattered. When he called, I snapped, "Tio Frank, what am I? Just another list name. Shadow among thousand soft women." His silence was long. He said, "Lucy, you're different." That I tried to believe him, but the tears kept coming. Still collapsed in 1963. At 52. Frank was 48. It was a hard year, the TV star while the press was unkind. Lucille Ball, broken. Marriage. Aging, can she keep the crown? I grinned on the covers. There was a pit inside. When weak, Frank would return. He phoned me to the studio during recording. A great year. Sitting in the corner with eyes closed, watching him sing. When I was 35, the year was great. He looked at me. I'll never forget that. A man sharing his sentiments via every note. But those secret nights often ended in tears. I told him one night after leaving the studio, "Frank, I can't keep being the shadow. When you display other women in public, I can't wait." Muttered, "Lucy, I love you uniquely." Maybe not totally, but I cried because I knew his definition of true would never satisfy a woman who had lost one marriage. In 1964, I was 53. Frank was 49. He was an icon and national voice. I continued my career. Still the powerful, clever woman the public loved. I was exhausted behind the lights. On my birthday, Frank hosted a small, press-free party. No media, just wine, a small cake, and him performing "Fly Me to the Moon" for me. I sat listening with tears. After the song, he kissed me forehead and said, "Lucy, I wish there was a place beyond the stars that I could take you." I broke down because I knew that was a dream that would never occur. In 1965, I was 54. Frank was 50. After over a decade in the shadows, loving privately, crying silently. The press grew curious. Tabloid hints increased. Learning to deny with a smile humor. But deep down, I wondered, what was I to him? Friend, lover. On his last night in 1965 in Los Angeles apartment, watching fireworks, I asked Frank if the truth would ever come out. "What will you say?" He lighted a cigarette, looked up, and said. I glanced at him, heartbroken. "Only Lucy made me laugh and CRY.IT was the verdict and the most honest confession I had ever received. I would never grasp his hand publicly. 1960. 1965 were years of stolen love and secret meetings that more tears than smiles. I was the laughing face, he was eternity's voice, but we only knew in the dark that we're two lonely souls seeking warmth in a life of lights and nasty whispers that I no longer tremble as I tell it everything. I want the world to know that between my laughing and his voice, a real love once existed, in tears, hidden in shadows, but never lied. I was 55 in 1966. Over a decade had passed when Frank turned 51. From Beverly Hills parties to whiskey-soaked evenings, covert meetings music, but 1966 changed everything. Feel my age in every crow's foot. Frank, however, appeared younger, magnetic, stronger. When he unleashed his return to the throne was lauded worldwide. I saw the Frank smiled on stage during the awards ceremony. Holding the prize, thousands were cheering, but inside my heart, I still heard though I remembered his murmur, "Lucy, you're the only one who makes me laugh." Frank belonged to the world, and I was simply a shadow. My 1967 age was 56, Frank's 52. He began a public romance with Mia Farrow, a much younger actress, nearly 20 years younger. Media exploded. Many magazine covers showed Frank and Mia together terribly, knowing something was coming. But when the phone called that night, he called with a sorrowful, husky voice. "Lucy, you know, right? I'm sorry, but I can't live alone," bit my lip and said, "Frank, you've never really been alone. I've been here 10 years. Silence. Then aside, it cut my heart like a dagger that night. Couldn't breathe. Frank was 53. I 57 in 1968. Yet the counterculture wave changed Hollywood. Rock and roll, New movies replacing old ones. I loved Lucy grew nostalgic. I battled to keep the light. Frank's songs like My Way immortalized him. Icon. My Way was more than a song to me. He sang, I did it my way. I saw myself in those words. It was my way. I laughed on TV. We cried and loved in solitude in 1969. Me 58, Frank 54. Frank performed at a Las Vegas party in a black tuxedo. The crowd roared as golden lights illuminated his face. I sat at. He flew from a rear table in the dark. His gaze swept the crowd, but I wasn't sure he spotted me. I wasn't going to him after the show in 1970. Frank was 55. The first lonely nights were almost a decade ago. I knew that our secret love had haunted me. I loved him, but he was never mine. I laughed on film, but was hurt. I looked in the mirror alone in my Los Angeles apartment that year. Observed a woman who had lived nearly 60 years in grandeur and the wounds that never healed. Do I regret it? Yes. Regret attaching my heart to a man I could never truly love. I knew without those years, I would never have known a love that made me laugh, cry, live, and die. Grew apart. Frank experimented with new ideas between 1966 and 1970. Loves, new songs, endless stage nights. I kept making America laugh, but behind-the-scenes lights and long evenings brought back strong recollections of him. Our ghost never let me go. Now at 77, as I recount it, audiences may be astonished, truthful, but Lucille may disagree. Ball, the queen of sitcoms, and Frank Sinatra, the lounge king. A secret, tearful love existed once. Frank Sinatra was born in 1915. When Lucille Ball turned 55 in the mid-1960s, he was 51 at his musical peak. Night Strangers, 1966. Then My Way, 1969. Made him a generational idol. But his spectacular career also my heart broke several times when other women always surrounding him came. Frank married young, gorgeous dancer and actress Juliette Prowse in 1960. The press nicknamed them Hollywood's golden couple. But their love, because Frank never belonged to one person, it ended soon. Mia Farrow, 30 years his junior, became his stunning lover in 1966. Mia was 21 and I 55. Frank ignored public criticism over the age gap. They were in the tabloids with the young blonde beauty. As I sat alone in my living room chewing my lip, until those magazine covers bled. Their 1966 marriage lasted 2 years. Years passed, yet it felt like a stab to my heart. Former cinema icon Lauren Beale was rumored with him. Ava Gardner. Frank never concealed his former passionate affair. The press covered dozens of women, from Hollywood stars to anonymous models. Lucille Ball resided on those storm's edges. I heard him murmur over the phone at night. But the next morning, I saw him hand in hand with another woman in the tabloids. I learned to grin, but each time my heart ached as I witnessed that. What am I in his life? A refuge? Special friend? Maybe one secret Frank chapter longest romantic novel by Sinatra? But Frank was like that. Live holy, love holy, leave holy. Perhaps it was that freedom. Now, that voice holds the world's breath. Sinatra died at 82 in 1998, leaving a huge musical legacy. My Way, New York, Strangers in the Night, Fly Me to the Moon's tunes still fill lounges, radio, and millions of hearts. I saw Frank as more than the everlasting legend and voice of the century. He made me laugh and cry, gave me delight, and tore me apart with all those women around him. At 77, I want to say to the so, Frank Sinatra was my man. In addition to Old Blue Eyes, the lonely evenings and tears I never shared. Music. My marriage to Dizzy Aries ended in 1960, and Frank was beginning a new romantic relationship. America recognized his great affection. Despite their mid-50s breakup with Hollywood's most attractive women, Ava Gardner. From 1951 to 1957, Ava was his wife. Because of that love, no one else could replace her. I saw him, he stated, intoxicated one night, holding Ava's portrait, red-eyed. Lucy, Ava was my hurricane. After the storm, you were mourning. I sat quietly because I knew I came after too much love, constantly shadowed by its presence. In 1962, I was 51, Frank 47. Press speculation suggested Frank was dating teenage dancer Juliette Prowse, Kinkin actress. I saw him holding a magazine that morning. Picture arm-arm with Juliette. Thinly smiling, I folded the paper and attempted to return to Lucy's set. Frank called that night. Hoarse-voiced. Don't trust cheap articles. Lucy, Juliet passes. Although I wanted to believe him, my heart still hurt that I was 50 and Juliet was in her early 20s. Could my love ever compete with youth? I'll never forget 1966. Frank publicly married 21-year-old Mia Farrow. The of Hollywood was rocked. The 30-year gap between a legend and a woman was termed the oddest marriage. Promising youngster. I felt betrayed watching their wedding on TV. Frank contacted me again that night. He whispered, "I know Lucy icin' happy, but I can't live alone. I need someone youthful and carefree to feel alive." I pursed my lips. Answered, "Frank, you need someone youthful, but I'm old." After a lengthy moment, he exhaled quietly. "Lucy, you are the one. Never forget 1968. His marriage to Mia ended fast. The tabloids reported divorce, saying Frank hated inexperienced youth. He was too temperamental for Mia." Frank arrived to my house that night, causing anguish and weird joy. Outside his Los Angeles home, knocking 3 familiar. When I opened the door, he hugged me like he'd lost part of himself. Soul whispered, "Lucy, you are the place I want to come back to." I cried. However, I knew Dad would go again as usual. In 1970, the world shifted, rock music exploded. Frank stayed steady, ageless. As new culture changed everything, he sang the song that defined his life, while I listened to him. Regrets, but too few to mention. I sat there in darkness wondering if I'm in 1971's few regrets. He dated numerous beauties, including Angie Dickinson and Jill St. John. He was still involved with Lauren Beale, whose name made me shiver. Strong, magnetic icon. I pondered what I was to him. Backdrop, a dear friend, or one of countless stars moving in the vast orbit of Frank Sinatra. I felt left behind. In 1976, he started dating Barbara Marx, his last wife. Barbara was kind, smart, and essential. She arrived when Frank was tired of adventures. When I saw them together, I realized I had lost him forever. In 1980, he was no longer the vibrant young guy I met in 1955 that he still sang, but gray had his hair. The other women ignored him. Fewer people about him. But Barbara was stable, quiet. Lucille Ball remembered late hours, secret calls, unshared tears. Frank Sinatra has thousands of women on stages. I wasn't the fierce one, but I was in his hidden life. The woman who made it was Lucy, not Ava or Mia or Barbara, who laughed when he was desperate and cried in his arms while the lights cheered. Frank was 66 and I 70 in 1981, but we had spent decades in our golden years and were aging. While maintaining my name's laughter, I still guest starred on TV series. Nightfall in the peaceful bedroom brought Frank memories flooding back. Some nights, I dreamed of his words echoing, blue eyes staring at me. 1955, awoke with teary cheeks. 1983, that year, Frank publicly adored Barbara Marx, causing Hollywood to explode. They came everywhere, hand in hand, smiling brightly. I watched the TV. They made me feel old and broke my heart again. Strength to compete. I had no reason to envy. I played an old album all night, yet a wound remained away. The music that made me cry in Frank's arms decades earlier. In the darkness, I wondered if he still remembered whispering that song to me, or if I had become his memory. Choose to forget. In 1985, we were ancient, yet the globe refused to let go. The press called Frank the eternal voice, musical. Memorial. My age, the wrinkles, and how I survived were repeatedly asked. I smiled in a youth-driven industry. I joked and avoided discomfort. But the mirror showed an aged woman. I still loved Frank, though I never said so. He never left me. In 1987, I heard Frank had several hospitalizations due to worsening health. Though I had no right to be with him, I composed a letter. Letter was long, but not sent. I wrote, "Frank, if this is the end, know that you have been my wound and greatest consolation. Years. Though you harmed me, you showed me true love." I folded that letter up and in my drawer. Nothing was sent. 1989, in my final year, I was hospitalized for heart failure. Surgery. Then difficulties that were unavoidable. I whispered to a friend, "If I don't make it back, remember this." Frank was the memory I never wanted to lose. They seemed bewildered because few knew what I hid. On April 26, 1989, I died, leaving an enduring television legacy. Before closing my eyes, I told my best friend, "Tell the world I loved Frank Sinatra," secretly, shedding tears, but never false. Frank lived another nearly decade, died in 1998 at 82, leaving a musical legacy irreplaceable that I think he was still singing my way on stage after I left. He recalled me among the throngs who shouted, "Lucy, woman who made him laugh in desperate times, hugged him in lonely nights, and loved him like never before acknowledged." At 77, if I could tell he would face the camera and reply, "Yes, a forbidden love existed between me and Frank Sinatra. Have loved that we wept. Was secret. It made us jealous that we suffered. Until I close my eyes forever. That memory burns that never-ending flame. Sitting back and reviewing me life. I have simply one truth I want to leave the world with. Between me and America's sitcom queen Lucille Ball, Frank Sinatra, nightclub king. Never-ending love existed once that allowed to exist. We met in 1955 when I was 44, he was 40. Lights and laughter fill MGM Beverly Hills Lounge. His eye knew I would never be free again when eyes stared at me. 10 years later, when I was 55 and he was 51, the press proclaimed him and me legends. A symbol. We were just two delicate people making our way under the lights. One other in darkness with tears, murmured vows, and unspoken worries. Frank adored several ladies. Juliet Prowse, Mia Farrow, Barbreach, a big life chapter. But I was a torn chapter, hidden in his private journal. The secret he never revealed was me. So I kept that hidden dot with me for over 30 years until today. Believe it? Dare you believe that behind the everlasting grins on TV, I cried until I couldn't breathe over one man? Dare you on the night before surgery in 1989, I whispered to you may be surprised that Frank Sinatra was my buried love, that you may doubt yet truth does not need anyone's permission, only needs to be spoken. And I do so today for myself and others, everyone. Frank died at 82 in 1998, that I quit over a decade before him. I think he sings somewhere, grows toward me. Echoes carry me to the moon. And amid millions fans applauding, I'm still saved. 5 ladies died through his life, maybe public. There was one unnamed woman, never recognized, but inscribed in his and my hearts. The womanism. So my biggest regret is that this love was never lived in light. I will tell you what makes me know I lived. Oh, those Frank Sinatra nights.